As paratroopers, the one thing that we can do is to be ready for any mission, whether we know what it is or not. And the only way you can be prepared for the unknown is be fit, be mentally conditioned, and be lethal with the weapon systems you have to be ready for that long, enduring fight.
That was Lieutenant Colonel Jim Browning, one of the battalion commanders in our Falcon Brigade. Last week, the brigade returned from a 9-month combat deployment to Iraq and Syria. You're listening to the All-American Legacy Podcast.
This is the 82nd Airborne Division, fearless among fighting units.
From Fort Bragg, home of the airborne and the center of the military universe, this is the All-American Legacy Podcast. An inside look at the 100-year history of the 82nd.
They are all American, all the way.
Hey, this is Joe Bacino with the All-American Legacy Podcast. We are here on Fort Bragg's Green Ramp. It's Sunday, September 24th. We've got Falcon Brigade is coming home. Green Ramp here is packed. There must be at least 600 people here to meet our paratroopers. Everybody's excited. We just got word that the plane has landed and the paratroopers will start departing here, leaving the aircraft and walking into Green Ramp for this welcome home ceremony in the next several minutes. You know, this is about our legacy. This show is about our legacy, but we're building our legacy today and every day. Our legacy is not just in World War II, it's not just in the Argonne Forest, Dominican Republic, Vietnam, and these places. Our legacy is what our paratroopers are doing today for the nation, for the world. Right now we've got paratroopers in Florida supporting the Hurricane Irma relief efforts. At this same time, we've got virtually all of 1st Brigade in Afghanistan or moving to Afghanistan. We've got the Falcon Brigade coming back from this incredibly successful deployment, defeating ISIS in Mosul and Tal Afar. And so this is a critical moment for the 82nd Airborne Division, and a moment to celebrate what we've done, not just over the last 100 years, but what we're doing for the country right now, and the legacy we're shaping for the next 100 years. So we're going to get some sound, hopefully talk to some people here, and bring that to you. So can I get your name and who are you here for?
My name's Kylie Aruz, and I'm actually here for Corporal J. Mills.
And how long has he been deployed?
He has been deployed for about 9 months, so just under 9 months.
How exciting is this for you?
It's really exciting. I can't wait to see him. I've been jitters all day, so.
My name is Kelsey Rogers. I'm here for Specialist Timothy Rogers.
It looks like there's got to be at least 700 people in here.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it and looks like it.
It's a big crowd. What are the plans for the rest of the day?
We don't really have any, I guess. Our plans, well, he hasn't seen our son in 9 months either, so.
Okay, so now we're going to talk to Colonel Pat Work. He's the commander of Falcon Brigade, Second Brigade 82nd. He just redeployed, is just with his family. We're going to walk up and talk to him about the mission.
We help the Iraqi Security Forces by providing them advice and assistance. And the advice was about helping them think through the problems that confront them, namely how to overmatch ISIS with their finite resources. And the assistance is largely about sharing information, sharing intelligence, and then providing precision lethal fires to kill ISIS so the Iraqis could continue to attack. Operation Inherent Resolve is really a regional operation against the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, and the important part of this right now is there's a mighty coalition that has come together and is decimating the army of ISIS. This army is circling the drain right now, and there's continued pressure on the army as the Iraqi Security Forces and then our Syrian partners continue to attack as well. What's it like?
Once again, here's Lieutenant Colonel Jim Browning. He commands 2nd Battalion of the 508th in our 2nd Brigade. Last week, he brought his paratroopers home.
Paratroopers are ready to do anything. They're willing to do any mission you ask them to do. And when you surprise them with a mission that they weren't ready for, they're still willing to execute violently as well. The nature of the advise and assist mission changed dramatically the day that we touched ground. Where before we were advising from distant locations, we were advising from areas that were 30, 40, 50 kilometers away. The day that we got there on ground, things changed 180 on us. We had the CJTF commander, the 18th Airborne Corps commander, Lieutenant General Townsend, sign a document that says, get as close as you can. Advise and assist at the lethal edge. That defines what I think paratroopers are asked to do every day. That defines what I want both my paratroopers and every paratrooper, I would assume, that was ever asked to do something that was not planned to ask. They are prepared to do anything. They are ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, Brigadier General Kingsbury. Okay, I'll keep this really brief. I know I'm the only person standing between these two groups, so I don't think I can keep you apart for much longer. I just want to say three really quick things on behalf of the Commanding General and of the entire 82nd Airborne Division. The first one is well done and congratulations on a fantastic job. The achievements of this brigade in Iraq over the last few months have kept us on tenterhooks back here, and you've been an absolute inspiration. The second point is to the people behind me and to the family and friends who haven't been able to make it here today. Everyone who's been on a deployment knows that it's the families who take often the hardest part of the bargain. So thank you so much for your support of these paratroopers over the last few months. And the final thing, as you break up now and have a little bit of time off, is to stay safe. Keep looking after yourselves and your buddies as much now as you have done in the future. Welcome home. Dismissed.
From my own experience, my own context, having been a young platoon leader, deploying with the 82nd in 2004, and then deploying again as a company commander in 2007 to 8, the fight was very much ours. Iraqi Security Forces was kind of a conglomerate of individuals. They weren't really a cohesive organization. 2017, when I come back here, my expectation was that it'd be very much the same. It was about the second week I was here. I was on East Mosul. We were still attacking the town of Al Arabi, getting ready to attack into a town called Al Guba in Al Rashidiyah. My organization, as an advisor team, when we got up there next to the commander, we identified some of the brigades moving back and forth. They're kind of the rear areas, and they have certainly paid in blood every inch that they gained in East Mosul and West Mosul. It made me realize very rapidly that this was a different military. This is a different army. This is an army that has paid in blood what they've gained. They are fighting day in and day out, and the costs were very real. When you're talking about hundreds being killed, thousands being killed, that's a different feel than the Americans going in there and fighting for them. This is completely on them, completely their fight. And we were there in a very small part, in an advisor role, in a way to advise and assist them with either direct fire, indirect fire, joint fires, bringing capabilities to that commander, that division commander, bringing him capabilities in the brigade commanders that they would never have unless the coalition was with them. And seeing them, one of the interesting things, Command Sergeant Major Donaldson made a comment to me. He said, look at this guy walking up. And I looked at him, he was ragtag, uniform completely torn. This was a brigade, one of the brigades that were moving behind the rear areas to move to a different area to attack. Completely ripped apart. And it was interesting because Command Sergeant Major Donaldson turned and looked at me, he said, this is what I imagined what paratroopers look like during World War II. Uniforms ripped apart. But as he got closer and closer, he can see his RPG, he can see his weapon. His AK-47 was completely clean. The guy next to him, his M16, oiled, ready to fight, combat ready. RPG set for anti-tank because of the V-bid threat. He already had one locked and loaded. It just made me realize that they learned the very hard way on how to win. Granted, they're not an elite force in any way, by any means, but they are the sons and the brothers and the fathers of Iraq that are willing to pay in blood to defeat and remove ISIS from their country. So we saw this, and it was a moment of clarity, a moment that helped me understand how to advise, helped me understand that they're all in.
Now, the distinct difference between warfighting in this context versus what I've done on my 10 previous deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan is that this is warfare by, with, and through a partner. And that's challenging because you really sacrifice a degree of control. And it takes a degree of empathy, humility, and patience where you are really putting the Iraqi Security Forces first every day of the week, all day. And so that's a different sort of context in which to fight a common enemy, in this case, the so-called caliphate of the Islamic State.
Once Mosul was complete, you had Tal Afar surrounded from the southern edge. The northern edge was still kind of open and free to move around, but what that did was it allowed us to shape Tal Afar for a few months before attacking. And where Tal Afar, what we saw in 9 months, taking in there in Mosul, 11 days in Tal Afar to finish. What we found was that ISIS realized the type of fighting that we were going to do in Mosul. And I think one of the things that did translate pretty well was the level of intensity that was being brought into Mosul was not being held back and was being prepared for that same sort of fight in Tal Afar as well. And so when we entered Tal Afar, you're talking about an entire ISIS defense that completely disappeared. They weren't willing to fight. There was a fissure between the foreign fighters and the local fighters because of the way that Mosul fell and how hard that fight was, and really no survivors came out of that. You're looking at Tal Afar, and I believe what ended up happening was that those two groups just realized that there's something that's not worth dying for here that we originally thought it was. And so as the Iraqi Security Forces entered the city, there was no civilians, not a single one. And we searched hours, days. I couldn't find a single civilian. And the handful of fighters, that defended the city, they were completely, very, very quickly neutralized. And so as I saw these paratroopers and as I see them come back, I realized that each one of them have contributed to something much greater than them by doing what we asked them to do every day. Be physically fit, be mentally prepared, be lethal every day.
What was it like for you to walk in? Did you lose anybody on this mission?
Yeah, our most sincere condolences go out to a handful of our paratroopers who didn't return with us, specifically the Lee family, the Stigler family, and the Brooks family. All three of those paratroopers epitomize everything that's exactly right about an all-volunteer force during a time of war, and I'm incredibly proud to have served with them, and there's a whole lot of us who miss them.
As a commander walking in here and seeing all these family members here, you got to be proud of your guys.
Yeah, extraordinarily proud of some of the best trained, best equipped, best led paratroopers the world's ever seen here in the 82nd Airborne Division. And now that we're back, reset everybody, give them a little bit of time to slow down a bit, and then prepare for whatever the nation needs us to do next.
All right, thanks.
All right, thanks. Thank you. All right.
Okay, Green Ramp is starting to close out here. Our paratroopers are going home with their families. They're reunited for the first time in 9 months. We saw one paratrooper here who met his 8-month-old son for the first time. So a lot of emotion here in Green Ramp. This was easily the biggest redeployment ceremony I've seen here in Fort Bragg. And, you know, it's important that we do this. It's important that we celebrate our warriors returning from combat. It's also important that we do this podcast, that we mark down this history we are creating. This show will stand in perpetuity as a testament to what the 82nd Airborne Division accomplished since 1917 and will continue to accomplish for the next 100 years. You've been listening to the All-American Legacy Podcast. I'm Joe Bacino. We ask that you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. We also ask that you leave a rating and review on iTunes, as those help others find the show. Thanks for listening.